Okay, all right. Well, welcome everyone. Buenas tardes, bonsoir. My name is Mirat Rodriguez. I am the Vice President and Chair of the Programming Committee here at VLAC. That is the Vancouver Latin American Cultural Center. And before we officially begin, I want to acknowledge that we are hosting this event from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh people. I want to encourage all of you to read and understand the history of this land and the people who have taken care of it for thousands of years, and for what it means for us to be here. There's a very fascinating resource that we like to share in all of our events, and Angela is going to help me sharing that in the chat. It's called Beyond 94. It's a website that monitors the progress on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action. And for those of you that don't know us as an organization yet, VLAC is a nonprofit organization with the mandate of sharing a deeper understanding of Latin American arts and cultures. Our goal is a big one, and it's to establish the first cultural center for Latin American arts right here in Canada, in Vancouver. If you still don't know about us, please visit our website. We're also going to add that link on the chat. And we also have added your email to our newsletter. So when you register for this event, you'll also be receiving news about our programming a couple of times a month. I also want to acknowledge the support of the City of Vancouver, VC Arts Council, Canadian Heritage, and Metro Vancouver. So tonight's format is actually going to be quite simple. Lois will kick off the conversation and we'll open up the floor to questions and comments from participants. Please feel free to unmute your microphones and raise your hand, whether it's like real or virtually. There's a button in the reactions. I think by now we're all very familiar with Zoom buttons. And so when that happens, if you have something to say, you're very welcome to do that. Lois is actually going to be the one moderating the conversation and giving you a chance to speak. And for those of us that just joined us, those of you that just joined us, this event is being recorded for our archives. And we will be sharing the link of our YouTube channel as well. So again, please feel free to turn your camera off if you're a little bit camera shy. So now I'd like to introduce you to Lois Klassen. Lois Klassen has a long history of facilitating artists publishing through her publishing imprint, Light Factory Publications. Klassen's artist books have appeared at the Vancouver Artists Book Fair, the Ridge Gallery Museum in Abbotsford, Santa Fe Art Institute, Emily Carr University of Art and Design, and she is currently a research fellow in SFU's Creative Arts Studio. Lois, thank you so much for organizing this, for being here, and welcome. I will let you take it from here and allow your introduction of the artists. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirat, and thank you to Angela and everyone at Vancouver Latin American Cultural Center. This is a really great venue for us, and I'm really excited to bring these artists together. Really, my motivation was for the artists to get to know each other, and for all of us to benefit from the conversations that they are able to share with us. So I just want to share my screen for a moment to show you that you can see this website, Light Factory Publications website. Yeah, I just thought I'd put this up just to help organize my reflections a little bit about this project. So Light Factory Publications is kind of a moniker that I've used for many, many years. It started when I was involved in mail art, you know, around the time of the millennium, 2000. And right now it sits like kind of a publisher page on a website here. And it's focusing on two projects, and both of those we're going to be talking about today. So first, we're going to talk about Present Cartographers, which is an imprint of Light Factory Publications. Present Cartographers includes two books, artist books, and both of them I've worked on with Daisy Quezeda Ureña, who you're going to meet right away. The first one was Terreno, Borderlands Linguistics. And it involved the artists who are listed here: Alice Leonora Briggs, Tings Chak, Israel Harros Lopez, Galari Koshkasaran, who's actually going to be exhibiting in Vancouver soon at ArtSpeak, I believe, Carolina Rubio McWright, Julian Cardona, Camille Gomez, Sheena Hoskell, Osvaldo Ramirez Castillo, who's here in the city, Tara Yvonne Trudel. Yeah, and then besides Daisy and I, Sylvia Arthur, who now is the founder and director of Library of Africa and the African Diaspora. We edited this together after some residencies that we all participated in at the Santa Fe Art Institute. And then Bosque Brotante is the new one that Daisy has really authored and conceived of, and I'll let her describe it a little bit more. Anyway, this series, Present Cartographers, is really a reflection on the border zone issues, and those are not specific to locations right at the border, as we explored in Terreno, but it is about how people relate to those regions and the politics that surround them. And then I'm just going to go back and demonstrate Reading the Migration Library website, because this one is really a project website. These are the new books from the 2021 series. But if you click on the books tab that's specific to this part of the website, you get an idea of all of the books that have been published since 2016. And they're all small scale, small publication run publications. And they're all freely available to view with PDF downloads. And some of them are very easy to reproduce, so you could print them and fold them up yourself. And quite a few of the authors have put up author pages as well. So you can take a look and get to know some of the other authors who are involved in the project. And I'll put the link to Light Factory Publications in the chat right away. Save it while I'm here. Okay, so I just wanted to let you know that of that 2021 series, there's a publication by Carlos Colleen that will be discussed today, and also Gabriella Galindez's book that we'll be talking about, and I'll demonstrate it before she talks. But in that series, we also have a really nice book by Krista Dahl, a project in itself, really. It's a little handbook to her project, and it's called The Migrators, and also is in the project is a two-sided poster, a really large scale full color poster, and a set of cards, and all of the meanings behind all of these objects are described in the handbook. And then there's a very nice poetry publication by Madame B. Speaker and Laurie Weidenhammer from Vancouver. It's called Feeding the Migration, Painted Lady. And there's this 3-book set by poets from Ghana. And this is a collaboration or a partnership with Library of Africa and the African Diaspora. So there's 3 chapbooks in this set, and one of them is by A.B. Gottfried and Son. So there's two poets, each wrote 1 poem. Gabriela Awa Mainu, he produced a manuscript, and Jay Kofi produced another one. So it's been a very exciting time for the project, and I want to acknowledge that this 2021 series was funded by the BC Arts Council and the Canada Council for the Arts. really grateful for that funding. It enabled us to commission artists and work with them as professionals, and also print in color. Now, you're probably wondering, how do I get my hands on some of these beautiful artist books? They are not for sale. They are available by free distribution. And the website describes, the RML website describes how you can exchange them through mail art. And the people who participate in the mail art exchange, their work is posted on the website under the mail art tab. I also distribute them freely in free libraries when I go out for walks, and I'm going to start getting other people involved in doing that as well. And they are, again, available by download. And if you want to propose other exchanges, maybe you're involved in an organization that would like to use them for maybe a door prize or something at a fundraiser or some form of mutual aid, send me an email, and we'll try to make them available or try to do something that works for you. Each of them are produced in an edition of about 100. And so some of them we're starting to get a little low on numbers, but there's still quite a few available. And I'm going to post my email, or the email for the project, in the chat right away as well. Okay, I think that's enough from me. I want to now introduce Daisy Quezeda Ureña. She's an artist behind Bosque Brotante. Daisy is an artist and educator based in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She's on faculty in the Studio Arts Department of the Institute of American Indian Arts. Quezeda Ureña produced Bosque Brotante with Light Factory Publications in 2021. So take it away, Daisy.
Thank you, Lois, and thank you, Black and everybody, for hanging out and joining us on Zoom this evening. Give me a moment while I share my screen. So today I'm going to be talking about Bosque Brotante, which is a small publication that we put out. I want to just first acknowledge this project and publication came out of an exhibition that was co-curated by Dr. Josie Lopez and Sabankar Banerjee at 516 Arts Contemporary Museum in Albuquerque, and in partnership with the Arts and Ecology program at UNM. I, along with other artists, were approached, and we proposed projects that addressed the loss of flora and fauna within the Rio Grande, so spanning from all the way from the San Juan Mountains in Colorado down to the Gulf of Mexico. So my project was interested in the collective stories of individuals that have resided along these along the Rio Grande watershed area. Bosque Brotante itself talks to that. Bosque is the name that we give the Rio Grande here. Northern New Mexico and Brotante, I found it to be the term of sort of sprouting, emerging. What is it that these contributors are sharing? The individuals that we had contribute to this discussion included Beata Sosi Peña on the far left with Marian Araujo, Jonathan Loretto in the middle with Roxanne Swintle, and El Profesor Robles Manuel with Aurelia Pieta Gomez and Susana Orlando Morano. And all of these are in different regions of New Mexico and Northern Mexico area. When I first sort of came up with this project, it was very object-based. There was this idea of creating these seed forms that came from each of the regions. And then it felt like there needed to be something more. These were some of the seeds that were shared with me from Jonathan Loretto, who's from Cochiti Pueblo, and he was in conversation with Roxanne Swintle. These are beeweed seeds. They're very small. So when I made the objects, the seed objects, this was what his seed was mirrored in. This is Beata Sosi Peña's seed. This is porcelain. And it was made using a skirt from her daughter, from a gathering that had a significance to her. creating the objects was an important sort of process in this, but it felt for me like something more needed to be had, and that the conversations that were had in creating these were very, very sort of pertinent. So I approached Lois and Light Factory Publications, and they were so willing to support my creating this project. Each individual that was a part of this has such a rich background and so much to contribute, and it felt that that was important to capture in what was being distributed, that it wasn't just necessarily an object. This is Beata Sosi Peña in the bluer shirt, Rejuvenation Bounce Back Fest, I believe it was. This is through Table Women United up in Española, and this was a garden that they've been working with youth in the community to sort of bring back. And there's youth that are working with public libraries in that area, collecting and storing and distributing seeds. Jonathan Mardo, I'm just trying to give you some context on individuals, that they're more than just people sharing. Jonathan is from Cochiti Pueblo, and he does pottery work. So in the image on the left-hand side, he's working with a student from IAI, firing some of their works. He's known for his bobblehead work. So you can see that on the right-hand side. A lot of what his conversation and contribution along the area was about the loss of the white clay when they built the Cochiti Dam. So he talks a lot about sort of the vibrations that happen in the loss of buildings and his sort of experience living through that. I apologize for not mentioning Beata's, that conversation revolved around Los Alamos Labs and the impact that had on Santa Clara Pueblo, and it continues to have on that area. And then the final contributor was El Professor Robles Manuel. El Professor Robles Manuel is recently deceased, so I'd just like to take a moment and recognize him for all of the work that he did. And I was very fortunate to have met him and had him contribute to this publication. He was an activist. In the publication itself, he talks about environmental racism and the impacts that has had. He led a whole bunch of his students to shut down the US border when they were protesting the dumps of Sierra Blanca on there. He has also done a lot of work within his community. He has a museum down in San Agustin where he worked with community members to keep all of their historical objects that were being extracted and sold to the US, essentially for the highest bidder. So you can see segments on the right and left-hand side of the slide of his museum area, and it's available in the middle section is the Rio Grande, which is about like 3 minutes straight down from, or straight north from where he resides. And this is sort of a segment of that publication in the conversations. His exchange and contribution to this was in Spanish. So I worked with individuals to make sure that the transcription was accordingly, and we were able to access archival photos to include and give context to all of the work that he was addressing and bringing up in his sharing of this. This publication also was very much possible through so much support. This was not a lonesome project. These are some of the students that helped. We actually embossed every single cover at the Institute of American Indian Arts in the printmaking studio. I worked with faculty Craig Tompkins to laser cut some plates. And then here are some students, Bryson Myers and Brandon Armijo, helping me emboss late nights in the studio. And I just want to take a quick moment and thank everybody that was a part of this, because this would have not been possible without the immense collaboration and support from everybody. So all of our participants, everybody that helped with the publication, putting it out, and all the institutions that contributed to it. So thank you.
Oops, I guess my mic was on the whole time. And thank you so much, Daisy. Okay. Oh, and since we have a little bit of time, we're a little ahead. I'm just gonna enlarge the screen here because I wanted to actually show you how Bosque Brotante looks and is handled. So Daisy had the brilliant foresight to put it in these envelopes and to also stamp them. So they mimic the cover. And oh, look at, with my light, you can actually see the embossing on the cover. And then the design is lovely. For both of the books that we worked on together, we used, we had the great design work of Rufino Modrano. I hope I got that right. Anyway, so each of the conversations have a beautiful typeface enlargement on the first page, and then they carry on with these gorgeous full bleed photos from the area. And also, just to let you know, this is what Terreno looks like as well. And there are still a few copies of them. And each spread features different artists who, most of whom worked with us through the residencies at Santa Fe Art Institute. Here's Osvaldo's. He's from Vancouver. Okay, thank you so much. I'd now like to introduce Carlos Colleen, the artist behind Tierra y Libertad, Little Mexico. Carlos currently lives and works between Mexico City and Vancouver, Canada. He's a visual artist and a PhD candidate in the Interdisciplinary Studies graduate program at UBC. Colleen's Tierra y Libertad, Little Mexico was created as part of Reading Migration Library in 2020. And take it away, Carlos. If I can find him, I'll pin here.
Thank you, Lois. Thank you, Lois. Thank you, The Black, Miret, Angela, and everybody for being here. It's always a pleasure to work with all the people that I care about and love. And yes, I'm gonna share my screen, so also you can have an idea about why Lois invited me, and she was so kind to put me into the boss of this, which is pretty great. I mean, everything started with this show, Little Mexico, that I present at the Rich Gallery Museum in Abbotsford in 2019. And it was connected to the idea of the SAUP, which is the Seasonal Agricultural Worker Program that I was working 6 years before what was when I completed the show. The idea was to work with the process of the community in Abbotsford. So eventually I had this process, also experiential, travel with the workers, then through curiosity and try to also like analyze why they're coming here, what are they doing. So at some point I found that they came through this program created in '66, specifically between Canada and Jamaica. Then Mexico jumped in 1974. And nowadays, Mexico is the country that more workers brings to the program. British Columbia joined in 2004. And in 2019, that was like before 2020 and 2021, more than 26,000, including more than 700 women came through the program. Then eventually, of course, during the pandemic, these numbers came down, and the government expect, the Canadian government, the Mexican government expect that eventually also the numbers increase, which I want to talk later about that. And then suddenly try to looking for organizations that help me also to understand better the circumstances about the migrant workers. Dignidad Migrante Society was the only one that want to talk with me. And what I love from Dignidad Migrante is that is run by the workers, is not running by like an external office. Basically, all the resources is based on what the workers apply for. It's just like a group of people like supporting them. And this is from the website of Dignidad Migrante. They started in the Okanagan Valley in 2006. Then eventually moving from different problematic perspectives. And Dignidad Migrante Society as it is started in 2014, if I remember correctly right now. So it's a nonprofit organization of temporary foreign workers who year after year come to work legally in Canada from Mexico and numerous other countries. So Dignidad Migrante is not just focusing on Mexican workers, workers from Guatemala, Jamaica, Central America, mainly like from Brazil, and also some parts from Europe and the Philippines. They're coming, and at some point, Dignidad Migrante tried to support all of them as much as they can. The mandate for Dignidad Migrante is to promote the self-organization of temporary foreign workers in general and of cultural workers in particular, to ensure access to all rights and to solve our daily problems during our stay in Canada. And I want to maintain the idea of our or us, because I think it's important also to understand that context of the process of privileged position that sometimes people like me, for example, I'm just going to talk about myself, came to Canada and then eventually stay here, establish, and then start working. And based on also how I was working in Mexico during the perspective and the theories through conceptualism in Latin America, which is more socio-political assets, the idea of the artist as a worker, or the process of the art is more like a tool that could be useful to support specific causes. All these conceptualist perspectives came during dictatorships in Latin America, and then eventually progressing through more inclusion in the worldwide spectrum, but at the same time maintaining these political stances and positions, separating the process of socio-political perspectives in contemporary art in Latin America, comparing with just contemporary art more established in the mainstream perspective. And at some point, I'm just going to show you quick some of these, some photographs about the exhibition. Also, the idea was to work with the archive that the Rich Gallery Museum has. And then eventually we combined, and we found also the process, or the historical process, in the agricultural perspective that Abbotsford has, also like including Mennonites and South Asian communities establishing there, and then eventually transitioning over the program, specifically in BC. And this is also one of the views that we can see in the exhibition. We have some caps, or I have access to have some caps from the workers representing the labor perspective, working 14 hours a day. That's also part of the perspectives. At the back, there's a poster, but it's a proclamation, because at some point, and I assume that the Consulate of Mexico, they still have it, the Consulate of Mexico in Vancouver, a blacklisting for the workers that complain. And it's more like the process of, yeah, sure, we want to take care of you, and then eventually putting you blacklist. And when you try to come back the next year, or coming back the next year, of course you can't, because, you know, like, you're a rebel, like you're not a good agricultural worker, right? And also combining the process of how they live, the process of the family, the detachment, and the dislocation that exists also with the workers, right? Because they coming to work around 8 months, then came back to Mexico. And of course, this process of leave the family behind, but at some point give all the resources that they need, it has also like affectations, let's say, affects the process of also the idea of the family, for example, or also the agricultural processes that exist in Mexico. Of course, I was thinking that not including Emiliano Zapata in the process will be kind of like heresy in some aspects, because eventually, of course, Zapata was one of the leaders during the Mexican Revolution in terms of the needs that the agricultural sector has in Mexico, specifically of the South, which is the majority of the workers that coming to Canada. They came from the south of Mexico, Oaxaca, Guerrero, Chiapas, all that Yucatan Peninsula, and at some point claiming the idea of land and freedom came in this dualistic perspective in the aspects of also the workers need land in Mexico. It's not just send them to Canada or send them here. It's also the idea of belong to some place, right? Like historically perspectives in terms of also how the government, alongside with the NAFTA agreement and this trilateral perspective through neoliberal perspectives, also they take the land from the workers and doing open minings, for example, or using it for specific developments in Mexico. So at some point, having the idea of Zapata, it was always important for me. Questioning at some point also what kind of things the Mexican government is doing and what kind of things they're not doing for the workers. And at some point in between, we try to add something, including the farms also. And talking with Adrian Fast and Laura Schneider, Adrian the curator and Laura the director of the Reach, we try to also like include the workers in as part of the, let's say, as part of the statement that we try to implement with the idea of the exhibition. The exhibition was more like to make a voice alongside with the workers rather than an art show for the workers. Because on my mind and on my perspective, like the workers knew all these things. They knew how they live, they knew how they suffer, how they work. So eventually it's more like try to make, let's say, a battle alongside them, right? Being allies in this process. So eventually we move through doing like soccer games, for example, and it's like, no, I mean, the workers, they have their own sports perspective. Or through Dignidad, they play loteria or some games, board games, that they have events like Mother's Day or Father's Day or the International Migrant Workers Day. So eventually Dignidad Migrante also like add all these processes in terms of leisure, right? And enjoyment, bringing to the workers. So eventually one of the things that we were thinking was make mini libraries. And I tried to avoid also the process of, and I think it was a healthy discussion as well, because for me it was a revelation or confirming some aspects in terms of like, I hate use people as objects in my processes, in my artistic practices. So at some point, the idea of sometimes bring the workers to see the show, make some shuttles every Sunday, so also they can come and see the show. I think we were using the workers as part of the show rather than including them in the process of make a voice with them. And I think this idea of the mini libraries was amazing. And we asked also through the Rich Gallery, we started asking to some farms. And at some point, we're able to create 3 different mini libraries that eventually they were rotating with other farms that they, of course, they want to add the idea of the mini libraries to them. So at some point, for me, to be honest, at some point I want to add more political perspectives, right? Like the history of Zapata, the history of the Mexican Revolution, the agrarian movements in Latin America or Mexico, the Movimento Sem Terra in Brazil, or the industrialization, and at the same time the massacres that suffer some workers in Latin America during dictatorial perspectives during the 20th century. At some point we start finding also novels and other kind of books, and I think that was a better position. And in terms of also the workers, they were able to read something or also understand that they have also the option to do other things rather than just work and then Sundays just like do laundry and send money and see their friends for 5 minutes, right? Also, we try to add, or I try to add, this idea of they need leisure, they need to being lazy, because also that's a right. And this is the moment when Lois was so kind and invited me to create the project as well. And the thing that I love for the project was that it was more like a conversation that Lois and I we have during 2020, in July 2020. That also was, it wasn't in person, it was more online, but also like we try to, or I try to maintain that process. And it came also from different perspectives. The questions that that I had from Lois in the conversation came also with the idea of, for example, giving away artwork, because the posters from Zapata, they were free access to the public, that they came to the gallery and take the posters to them. And also the idea of the libraries, like giving something to or extend beyond the walls of the gallery of the mainstream, also like the possibilities from in the artistic perspective, the box and the idea of the leisure, comparing with some aspects or some institutions or organizations that exist in Mexico, publishing or printing like very affordable books. Paralela en Libertad, or for To Read Freely, is one of the organizations that exists in Mexico. And now with Paco Ignacio Taibo II in Mexico, through the Fondo de Cultura Económica, is like the publisher, the Mexican publisher. And they try also to get like access, not just for affordable books, but also from regions that are pretty far from the cities, also they can have access to it. And we're having also these conversations in the terms of the archive, my participation on Dignidad Migrante, that I try to include also more these cultural perspectives, because it was so organic, the process that I had with Dignidad Migrante, that eventually I was new that I was part of Dignidad Migrante doing things with them. So also I appreciate that. And my point is also looking in retrospective, like all this process, what it changed in the last 2 years? Well, I mean, not too much in different aspects. I'm still believe in some ideas that I expressed with Lois in terms of, this is not just a Canadian problem, it's also a Mexican problem. We can't just send the workers like and being by themselves without support. Organizations like Dignidad Migrante or other nonprofit organizations, also they need to revise and being more in an ethical position in terms of how they support the workers. I still believing that they need more time for leisure stages in the way that also they connect with the society, also the society that they live in, Abbotsford or Langley, or the suburbs that exist out of the city of Vancouver. And also I want to add the idea of how like the library also create at least, or try to bring some light in the way that also how we connect with our food supplies, or the idea of how like Canada depends a lot of these programs, right? That eventually we're not aware, like all the things that happen behind. And of course, when you're more immersed in the process, like you can know or see more dark stories behind. But I think eventually it's more like, as a society, try to understand that also they're part of us. I have always discussions and I have always different points in terms of, sometimes the workers looks also for permanent residency. Of course, politically speaking, it's really hard to maintain that process of after 5 years coming back and forth, eventually you get permanent residency. I understand the politics behind. And those are the moments that also I understand that the consulate is not doing anything. And at the same time, the Mexican government is not doing anything as well. I think they need also land in Mexico to work. And eventually they want to travel to Canada. They're free to do it. And also Canada need to take consideration in terms of also they need to change the stances of privilege that they have. So yeah, I think the process of the libraries is more also the idea of not just leisure for me, thinking also like now that we're able, or I was preparing also the slides for this event, is also the idea of free speech. It's also the idea of the workers have a voice, and also they need to rise it and say like they don't agree with some things that happen, also like in the contracts or the way that they move, or some limitations that they have, and so on and so on. So yeah, I just want to show you fast. This is the poster. Also like try to add this Mexican style in terms of sign paintings. And yeah, at the end, I think this book helps to keep raising the voice. And that's why I'm very grateful that Dignidad Migrante moves also through the cultural side, and also me as a worker as well. I'm not considering myself an artist, I'm considering myself more as a worker, also can add some voice alongside with the workers. So I think that's it. Thanks everybody, and looking forward for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos.
Thank you.
I'll remove the pin there, and I'm just, let's see here. I'm just going to show people the book, how it works as well, and also take the opportunity right now to mention that all of these books in the 2021 series were designed along with the help of Victoria Lum, Vicky Lum, who is a designer here in Vancouver, and she's worked with many artists, and she's really a complete joy to work with. Anyway, this format that kind of looks like maybe a 1970s paperback, the way she's laid out the covers, and repeat in all of the different publications from that series. That's owing to her. So this one has a little band, and it contains these 2 items. And this little pamphlet has the conversation that we had, and we did it in 2 languages. And Carlos was very patient with my Spanish, which was mostly derived from Google Translate, but I was taking Spanish lessons at the time. So I was really getting into using Spanish. So it's Spanish and English, and it's not a translation. The languages go back and forth. And then as he demonstrated, this is the poster, and it's folded as a, also as a bilingual pamphlet. So if you look at one side, it's in English, and the other side is in Spanish. And then inside is the poster that he showed you. Okay, thank you so much, Carlos. So that leads us to Gabriella Galindez, our final artist here today. And she's the artist behind this one, Notas sobre un recorrido, el Centro de Procesamiento de El Paso. My apologies. It's been a while since I've had Spanish lessons. Notes on a tour, the El Paso Processing Center. Gabriella Galindez resides in Aspen, Colorado, but I met her in El Paso, where she was living when I was there in 2019. In Colorado, she's the School, Youth, and Family Programs Manager at the Aspen Art Museum. She received her master's in Latin American and Border Studies from the University of Texas at El Paso, UTEP, and her bachelor is in Fine Arts from the School of Visual Arts in New York. So take it away, Gabriella, and I'm just going to pin you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Louis, for the introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining us and being here. I do not have images for me to share my screen. I kind of wanted to mostly talk about the book. And I know I'm pinned, right? So I wanted to go over a few things about the book. First of all, of course, the title says that it's Notes on a Tour of the El Paso Processing Center. And I know the word tour sounds like something not negative. And the reason why I use that word is because that's how Homeland Security was advertising the tours for their processing center. The reason why ICE, which is a brand from Homeland Security in the United States, the reason why they were advertisement or offering these tours to the public was because there is, a lot of negative rumors, as I said, about the conditions in their processing centers. So they started offering tours to the community, but not any community. You had to go through this whole process, not any community member, but you had to go through this very long process, and you had to this whole process of background check and things like that, and they wouldn't just admit anyone. And of course, not everyone knew about these tours. It's not like it was advertised on the newspaper, or anything like that. So it was anyways, how I knew about these tours was when I was in school, and of course I was studying this. I was studying Latin American and border studies, so I heard about it, and it wasn't part of a class. It was just something that I heard during one of my classes. It was actually a class that was, they were teaching us about, how to do research and things like that, and how to document. And so that's how I learned about this tour, and so it does say on the intro, and it's also in English and in Spanish, and it's a little accordion book, and it has 6 places that the ICE agents took us to, and it wasn't just me. It was a group of people. It was a combination of people from ACLU from Texas. It was there were some immigration lawyers. There was other people from my university. So anyway, so that was the group that I went with to this tour. And it does say in an introduction that it was part of that, not that it was part, but that I learned about this tour when I was in school. So it's my documentation was still very the way I would document was still very, very new. That's what I was learning to do. So the only thing I had to document, of course, they don't allow any cameras, just any phones, anything like that. So the only thing I had to document was just a notebook and some pencil. So they took us to about 15 places in the processing center, but I only did 6 in the book. And the reason for that is that out of all of the 15, those 6, it's not that they were the most impactful, but it was where I was able to gather a more visual, like we were actually able to go into those places, and a conversation of the group, back and forth of the room or the place was able to happen because we were actually able to see. There was other places like the religion trailer, where they just pointed it out, but we weren't really able to go in there. So it's not like I could, document more than just it's there, So that's why it's not included. But it doesn't mean that these 6 places were the only ones that are, were in the process. The woman is because this was not me, and this tour was not the first time, or it wasn't the only research that I was doing. I was also doing visits for people that were in the processing center, and I was also going into immigration courts, but not courts from people asking for asylum, but for people that were being charged for federal offenses, but immigration, like there were immigration courts, but they were being charged for federal offenses. So anyways, in one of these visitations, I met this transgender woman from El Salvador, and I got to visit her several times. And the first time, or I think it was the second time, where I felt a little bit more comfortable to ask her why she was wearing red uniform, because it's something that they do in this processing center. They do the same practice that is done in prisons to color code inmates, how they call it, or people. In this case, it was people that are asking for asylum. So they were doing the same practice of color coding. But of course, I had an idea that red usually means high risk, and but usually they wear a bracelet that is also matching their uniform so that they can't change it, so they can't. So I saw that her bracelet was orange, but her uniform was red. So I asked her why those two things were not matching. And she told me first of all, I'm in isolation. And one of the things that I like to do, because I'm in isolation, the reason why she's in isolation was because she was transgender and it was done for her protection, apparently. That was, what they told her. So she was in isolation, and one of the things she liked doing in isolation was to do her makeup. And I don't know if I was in commissary or but she found mascara. So that's what she would do when she was in isolation. She would do her eyebrows. So one of the ICE agents found it and said that was contraband. And since it's contraband, as a punishment, they changed her uniform from orange to red. And one of the things that I say in my book is that if you're wearing red, you don't get to have a job. So it was a way of punishing her for having contraband that she had no idea was contraband. And also, they didn't tell her when that punishment was going to end. So that's the reason why I have a woman in red. Of course, I couldn't take a picture of her, but I wanted to have somebody I looked for somebody that looked like her, so to, be the model for the book. Another thing that I want to mention is this. So towards the end of the book, I kept doing visitations and stuff like that. And of course, COVID happened and the centers were closed. And this is briefly mentioned in the conclusion of my book, but it just got really, really hard to keep in communication with her and with other people that I was visiting. And one of them is because, of course, COVID, they there was a lockdown, there was no visitations or in person allowed. And it was a way that ICE and all these other immigration processing centers, they used this time where you couldn't really communicate with them to move them around the country. And these people did not have contact with anyone. And of course, since you can't go into the centers to visit them because of COVID, families lost touch with them. They didn't know in what processing center they were placed. A lot of my letters were returned either by ICE, by the processing center, because the person was not in that center anymore, but they wouldn't tell me where the person had gone. Or by 2 times it happened to me that it was returned by the postal office, because that address was not a mailing address, but it's the address that they had online, So anyways, that being said, this was during the Trump administration. And I feel like I would see so much of this injustice in social media and the news about detention centers, kids being in cages, kids being separated from their families. But when the new administration came, those separations of family actually increased with Biden. not too long ago, I was offered a job. If you guys don't know, Paso, Texas has a very, very large military base where they have been using to put either camps for children and just overall, since it's so big, the military base, they've been using it for this purpose, for putting detention centers, and so anyway, so about 6 months ago, I was offered a job at in Fort Bliss, and that's the military base, Fort Bliss, because they had a camp for children that were separated from their parents. They couldn't find the parents, or they were just children that came without company, unaccompanied children. And so I was offered a job to be a case manager, to help these children find their parents or family members. But the reason why I didn't take the job is because I had some family members working there doing the same thing. And I heard that they didn't have any structure, and that it took about 6 months for people to get to a child. So it seemed like it was just an image kind of a job, like not a job, but the action that the administration was taking. And there was there's like a whole process that they have to go through. So if they ever got, and by this time, a lot of these kids have families that are in the United States, but a lot of these families are undocumented, so they would not answer the phone. There's families that are scared, or some of them, they would answer the phone, but there was just all these logistics that made it super difficult to connect these children to their families. So anyways, and the reason I'm saying this is that this was 6 months ago, and now I don't see any advocacy anywhere, and it's increasing. It's more than the Trump administration. Yes, that's a little bit about the book, and I hope you guys get a chance to. And the website, if you don't get to have a tangible copy, you can see it online, and all the illustrations. It can be disturbing. It's just wanted to warn you before you see the descriptions. Yes, I look forward for to any questions. And thank you for listening to me. And I apologize, I don't have images, but I kind of wanted to be more of a conversation than anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriela. That's wonderful. Okay, so what we thought we'd do is just take about 10 minutes. I'd like to see if we can get a bit of a discussion going between the presenters. So I'm going to try to pin everybody. I have a couple of questions for you, but after that, we'll open it up for questions from the audience. And if you want to get started by posting questions, go ahead, put them in the chat. But there isn't a whole too big of a group today, so you can also unmute yourself, and we'll take questions. But let's first get our speakers up here, and maybe what I'll do is just read out one of the first questions I had. Both Bosque Brotante and Carlos's Tierra y Libertad, Little Mexico, are artist books that sit inside or alongside larger artist projects. And in both cases, the artist books aren't simply to document an artwork. They're there as another element in the way that the artworks interact with non-art publics, as well as cultural groups. So I'm wondering if Daisy and Carlos, if you can describe something about what small-scale publishing has added to your projects. Just gonna try to find you. Here we are.
I'm gonna start, Daisy, if you want.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and then I can follow you.
Okay, so should I start or you start?
Como gustes.
You first if you want it. It's fine.
Okay. So I think this small publication for me became a way of sharing and making accessible the stories and informations and maybe things that we weren't necessarily informed on. I know that in northern New Mexico, there's conversations about Los Alamos labs and the impact it has on the land and sort of some of the things that have been dumping into the river. So having it in a physical print for me made it much more accessible. Also that it's available online. I think about access to certain regions and some areas don't necessarily have access to internet. So having it available in a print format that can be distributed and shared with others made it extremely accessible. In addition to this, making it available in a print, we're distributing it to libraries and anybody who is reaching out asking through Light Factory publications. So it became a way of sharing knowledge and maybe looking at interconnectedness that's happening between issues among different regions so we can begin to sort of have a conversation and a discourse that are supporting one another. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other things. I know water rights is a huge thing that's happening across many areas, right? So I think it contributes to that, and it makes us more aware. I think social media is doing that to an extent, but there's still regions around the world that don't have access to that. And I was reminded of that when I was visiting my family down south in Mexico, and I was trying to work from where I was and nothing was going through. I thought I was sending information through to my students and it never went through. So it was reminding me the importance of like sitting with people and having conversations and having print material. I think that's always going to be important and something that we're going to need to continue to have and not necessarily just rely on media-based stuff. So that was my sort of thoughts or two thoughts on that. Carlos, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are that what the book adds to the project is not specifically to the art exhibition. It's more specifically to the idea of fighting against some illegal actions, the most part of them against the workers. And I think just increase the voice and also have accessibility for other people that they weren't able to go to the show, but at the same time also have interest of the things that happen around them. Like I believe that also this kind of collaborations, I appreciate the ethics behind. I appreciate how is my relationship with Lois in my particular case with this project, and eventually I know that she's also there's a very good intentions also to increase that voice. And I think that's also important when we talk about, for example, the border, or when we're talking about the migrant workers, that sometimes there's people, based on my experience, that also try to come to Dignidad Migrante, artists or students from universities around, and they just try to make artwork about the workers. But eventually when you try to tell them, okay, like ethics are behind, the workers decide by themselves if they want to participate or not. Like, I'm just the voice. Eventually I have to go through the board and tell them there's a student or there's this person that want to do this, and if they say no, it's no. And sometimes people don't act in a good way about the response of the workers the most part of the time. And despite of like probably these weren't specifically through the board, eventually when I mentioned them that we want to make this book, they were also happy in terms of people is paying attention about what is happening, right? So as long as we can increase the voice, is the better. So yeah.
It made me think of like both you and Gabriela's publication also made me think of the ability of having like written material that can support maybe public changes or policies, because they're physical prints that can be utilized in scholarship, even beyond that. So I think it's also important to have that as a record.
Yes.
That's a good point. And it also makes me think about Institute of American Indian Arts, because they have a good artist book collection there. And I've been to that library. And what I love about it is they have all the artist books available for the students to handle in the inside. I don't think you can take them out of the library, but it's all in open shelves for them. They have a very accessible approach to artist books there, or they did when I was there. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say they continue to do. I think the library staff and the archive team are always pushing and making sure that students and anybody who, or scholars, artists, whoever that are interested in coming in and researching, have that information available. So I think very much still present.
Great. Another question that I thought I'd throw out there is about the use of Spanish in these books. So it just occurred to me that we took a different approach in each of them. In Bosque Brotante, one of the interviews, like Daisy mentioned, was or conversations, it wasn't an interview. It was a conversation that took place in Mexico. And so that one is printed in Spanish and not in English. The rest are in English. In Carlos's, we already discussed, it's a conversation that is in both languages. And Gabriela's is a straight translation. So it's a book that's essentially written in English. Actually, it was written in English, translated into Spanish, but we put Spanish first. So it's like a Spanish speaking book, maybe Spanish language book, I should say. Anyway, I wondered if anybody has more to say about the use of or having these two languages sort of simultaneously in these works. And I'm wondering if you can comment on the way Spanish language is circulated through art in North America. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts on how to assert Spanish or Indigenous languages in your own art practices, despite the hegemony of English in places like Vancouver and Aspen. Not so much in Santa Fe, but almost. Any thoughts?
Well, I would like to say that, so the reason that I wanted to, of course, have this in Spanish, other than, it being the theme of the Migration Library, is because, for example, at least in my community, in El Paso, it's just been recent that I've been in Aspen, Colorado. That's a very recent thing. I just moved here like 3 months ago, but I'm an El Paso, Juarez native. But anyways, people that have been there lived there their whole lives, that's including my parents, they were, and family members and other friends or coworkers, they were unaware that there was a processing center in El Paso, right there as we go to and from work. People like my family members it's not that they don't understand English, but having a book that is written in Spanish made them actually be interested in reading it. It's not just like, oh, you're going to read it in Spanish because you don't know English. Like, both of my parents know how to read English. My sisters know how to read English. My family members know how to read English, but their first language is in Spanish. So that, just the fact that it was in Spanish, made it more I guess, appealing to sit down and read it and look through the images. And of course, these are books that I've been giving away to coworkers or people, that I meet shortly. So I do not know what their reaction is, but at least from somebody like my parents that have lived and my family members that have lived in this region that did not know that there was a processing center, just the fact that it was written in Spanish made them just look and were completely surprised that that was happening. It's not that they were unaware that immigration happens but I think they thought it was something more like in the outskirts, or like they didn't ever stop to question. And of course, everyone is so busy with their day-to-day lives that unless it's directly affecting you, then you know about it. So that's how Spanish has helped, especially something that is so invisible, or for some people it has helped the awareness of what's happening. And to answer the second question was just how Spanish is incorporated in art in North America, right? I think that's been one of my goals, especially in a place like Aspen, Colorado, which is a very expensive, mostly, well, it's not even anymore. That's my point, that it's the Aspen Art Museum is the only contemporary, or the only museum in the western slope of Colorado. And there's a lot of small towns that are in the surrounding area of Aspen. And it turns out that 40% of the population is now Latino. But yet there's barely any Latinos that come to the museum because they don't feel it's theirs or it's for them. And that's one of the changes that I've been trying to do, is to include language in the museum in Spanish, and not as a subtitle or something on the side, but just with the same emphasis, like the advertisement, the activity cards, the program, the description, everything in Spanish, because it's a population that it's now becoming the majority, and still it's not catering to them. So at least in this region, so anyways, that's how I think it should be important, just like first making the community, the Latino or Latina or Latinx community, know that art is also for them, and that is with language. And yes, that's my opinion.
Daisy, do you have any comments on that? Or Carlos?
I guess I'm pretty close to El Paso from where Gabriela, you're sort of come from. I'm just, 5 hours north of it in Santa Fe. My family does live in that area, so I do visit a bit more frequently. I think in the Bosque Brotante publication, it came sort of naturally. It didn't feel appropriate to change the language in which people were communicating. And we also included indigenous languages from the individuals that identified as that in the text. So I just wanted to recognize that. So it just felt natural, sort of inherent, like why change it? And the Spanish conversation, I think, felt a bit more, at least when I shared it with family or Spanish speaking acquaintances, they felt like it gave them more context or information and access to someone else that they didn't have before. So that was, I think, super important and relevant in that regard. in regards to Spanish speaking in the art realm, I think in Santa Fe it's pretty prevalent, at least through the interactions I've had in public schools or community centers. But within the arts, it feels like it changes a bit. The canon feels very white, and the conversation is very much in English. And a lot of the work that when I was first sort of emerging or sort of coming into art, it didn't feel like it was a space for me. I feel like I've become more, I've started to look more and become a little bit more sleuthy in finding people that are having similar conversations, that are wanting to explore similar issues, and they are out there. I think of organizations like Black that's doing it. I think of other institutions like the Hispanic Cultural Center down in Albuquerque, or the US Latinx Art Forum, and other institutions around the area that are sort of making that space available and having an intersection in different sort of languages, however they're spoken. Because Spanish isn't just the only language within Latin America or other regions, right? So I think it's important. But I think it's still shifting and it's changing and it's growing. So that's what I have to share.
I mean, in my case, I think geopolitically speaking, we can avoid the idea of how the continent was forged and how Spanish is also part of the connection that exists alongside with Portuguese and French and different indigenous languages. But for me, I use it also the idea of Spanish more in terms of experiential perspectives. I lived 30 years in Mexico City. I considering myself Mexican and Latin American. And I can avoid, just because I live in Vancouver, speaking English, avoid my heritage, my roots, and how my brain is still working on Spanish, right? So I think it's also a trigger in terms of also try to bring people to the conversation in terms of curiosity. I try to be curious in the process that I made, and also I try to create that experience with the audience that I try to achieve, which is everybody. But I think also in the practice, because I use a lot of language on my practice, and some of the names that I use for my artworks is in Nahuatl, the Aztec Mexica language. But I think it's also because I believe that I can bring alongside with the Latin American community the idea of avoid using Spanish just in the process of stereotypes and cliches in terms of how the Spanish is bringing to the North American context, despite of like the big community that exists, and at the same time try to make a statement that the experience or the historical experience that exists from Latin America comparing with or in relation to the indigenous communities in Latin America is completely different comparing with the United States and Canada. I came from a family with multiple backgrounds. I don't consider myself or adding also all these things to specific purposes. I'm just like trying to put on the table that I'm Mexican, and Mexican also represent, personally speaking, having like Afro-Mexican or indigenous background behind, and also the indigenous language, or at least the Nahuatl perspective, is part of me as well. And I can see that kind of dislocation, at least in Vancouver, right? Like the words that we use in Spanish, that they came from the indigenous languages, same in Brazil, also connecting with African languages, right? So it's more like a weapon in terms of make a confrontation based on that possibilities that also the language bring to my projects. So I mean, and why not at the end, right? So it's also that.
Yeah, what I like about all of them is that it's sort of moving. I guess I like the word curiosity. It's moving towards diversity, I guess, rather than away from it. So it's really beautiful. Okay, so we've got just under 10 minutes left. I'm wondering if there are any questions from the audience. People can unmic if they want. Unmute, I should say.
More than a question is just to say congrats to the artists, to media artists, to be in front of everyone, to share your experiences. For do that, you need to be an artist. Yeah, thank you for using all like I put on the chat for sharing to Canada and to the world what really Latin American is. Because sometimes in Canada, they don't know what really is being Latin American. Sometimes you can find some kind of stereotypes. I'm from Cuba, okay. I'm feeling the same, an artist. Yeah, sometimes even Canada, that is a multicultural country, still have a process, still have a long way to understand what multicultural is. Yeah, and Canada need to know that adaptation, only the immigrants don't need to adapt. Canadians need to adapt too, because adaptation integration is in two-way process. And the culture can help to make that dream true. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Life go on, everything of the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Eber. Any other comments or questions? Oh, Vlak Mirat has posted some interesting links. One about a University of Indigenous Languages in Mexico City. Yeah, and also a really nice resource for trans visibility and immigration, right?
That's right. I thought it might be of interest.
Yeah,
And
thanks so
then
much.
We have really nice comments from people just thanking us. And
I
trying to
think
see if
that,
there's-
is it Ginger? You have a question?
Yeah, thank you to all of you who have presented your work. I'm curious if you have other projects lined up, if these projects have led you to further work, or if you have something completely new you're working on related to migration or language or anyone.
Yes, this book actually has inspired me to, I started writing a lot, and I started writing about other things related with the border that I have experienced or seen. And this book has made me, it just has inspired me to keep doing this method if I want to get the word out of things that I have experienced in the border. This and the processing center was just one of the many. You know, I have been going through my notes of when I was doing research for like the immigration courts and stuff like that, and I'm like, I could visually make like another artist book. I could do something with this, and or other, you know, like the other time I went for a hike, you know, in the mountains that are there, you know, that, you know, are there on the border, and I saw clothing and a backpack, but I saw it like scattered. So I've been doing it more of like a narrative, not so much like in an intense research, like conversations and back and forth, but, you know, just things that I've seen that I've, you know, anyways, yes, this book has inspired me to keep doing more artist books. This is the first time I do something like that. I'm more of a I do more sculpture. So, but this has, you know, opened another window to do this kind of artwork.
Carlos and Daisy, do you want to talk about any other projects?
Daisy?
Immediately in relationship to publication print books, I don't have any projects, but I'm sure they'll be soon coming forth. A lot of what I've been doing more recently is reconnecting with the community here in Santa Fe, because I think that's important, especially sort of still existing in the pandemic and needing to build relationships and connect. So I've been working with some of the youth. We've done some clay projects. I'm working again this week with some middle schoolers, sort of getting to know them and just conversing and creating space for a discussion. But I think all of my work sort of moves back and forth and is very fluid. And I think it feels like all of our work is in some sense connected to personable relationships. So it goes into that area, and I think it just shifts back and forth. But that's where I'm at.
Well, in my case, well, Little Mexico is going to Calgary in next year. So I think this project is more evolving in terms of what is happening with the workers at the time, and also connecting with the community that exists in Calgary. And then eventually this is more like the process, more in terms of the theory behind rather than the objects. And also I make a differentiation between my contribution with Dignidad Migrante, and I avoid completely the idea of all the projects or the projects that I do in Dignidad Migrante, their artwork or artistic practices. I try to put it like pretty aside, and try to make also that balance in terms of like, if I see that every time that I go to Dignidad Migrante, I'm doing artwork, I lose the idea behind the first experience with Little Mexico. So it's not a standby, it's more like, I love how like the experience transition through more like a real process, again, using just the tools that we have around, including arts and this cultural perspective. And I mean, I'm pretty curious with research. Now I'm moving more through surveillance, social political perspectives, and at the end is connecting with what happened here, how I see the environment that I live with within. And yeah, same as Daisy. Also, I think all the artwork that I made is connected. It's just like using the topics in terms of how I'm able to produce some projects. And I have projects like that can take as Little Mexico 5-6 years, and then eventually have the objects or the results to being exhibited. But I take my time. I'm more a reader rather than a producer. So yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're pretty much at time. Miret, I think you had a few closing comments, but I want to thank everyone for coming and for being part of our discussion. Yeah, and thank you especially to Gabriela, Carlos, and Daisy for your contributions and for giving us, these really rich background thoughts and reflections on the project.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lois. I would like to definitely echo that. Thank you all for the speakers, the artists, Lois for organizing, Angela for helping us organize this as well, and everyone that has attended. So again, the video of this of today's talk will be available on our YouTube channel. So I think Angela is going to share that with us as well. We have in-person events coming up, so that's, I mean, I just can't believe I'm saying that. And so we have a concert happening on April the 15th, and it's really soon. We still have some tickets available. They're very accessible. Usually all of our programming is free. This one will be at the college, and it would be a celebration of the 200 years bicentennial of independence from Portugal, of Brazil. We were speaking about this, so something to celebrate. And so we're going to have this sort of entrancing journey through the nation's many musical forms with vocalist Fernanda Cuna and guitarist Rick Schwager. I hope I pronounced that properly. So if you would like to get your hands on some tickets, we're also going to share those links with you. If you can make it, it would help us a lot if you can let your friends know. Again, all of our activities the goal is for us to secure a physical space to support these kinds of events when we don't have the internet. And if you would like to keep events like this available to everyone, please consider donating any amount, even if small, for any of our other programming. As a reminder, VLAG is a charitable nonprofit organization and donations are always welcome. The link is also in the chat. Just one last thing, we also have a 2-minute survey that we would like you to answer. If we don't have right now the link, Angela, I think we might be able to send it as an email post the event. So that would be super helpful just to let us know how we're doing, what we can do better, what kind of events you would like to see in our programming. Again, these spaces are for you. So that's it. That's really it for tonight. Thank you so much for coming. I am going to turn off my camera, mute myself, but I'm going to leave the room open if anybody wants to grab those links. And thank you. Thank you all again for being here. Enjoy your evening. And we hope to see you soon.
I just want to say something fast, which is basically, Lois, thank you so much for everything. Like, you're the force behind this.
Yeah.
It is not possible without you. So we're here because of you, and you're the boss.
I hope not. But thank you, Carlos. It's been a big pleasure.
The pleasure.
Thank you. Perfect.
Everybody.
Thank you
Bye,
all.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Good night.